Good morning. As students of Theosophy, we gather every Sunday at the United Lodge of Theosophists locations around the world to discuss and promulgate the original and unadulterated teachings of Theosophy, as given out by Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and Mr. William Kwan Judge. The United Lodge of Theosophists, or ULT, is an association of students of Theosophy which came into being through the determination of a small number of Theosophists to pursue the objectives of the Theosophical movement without organizational distractions and formalities. The first parent lodge of ULT was started in Los Angeles, California by Mr. Robert Crosby and 7 other associates through the adoption of his declaration on February 18, 1909. Our lodge in DC and many others around the world were founded thanks to the revival efforts of Mr. Bahman Pestonji Wadia. Today's presentation will be on Science and Secret Doctrine, Vibrations. And next week, the topic will be Cycles of Spiritual Opportunity. Our DC Lodge also meets every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the ocean of Theosophy. The Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Dhammapada. This chapter is titled The Thousands. Better than 1,000-word speech of empty words is one pregnant sentence, hearing which one feels peace. Better than 1,000-verse poem of empty sounds is one stanza, hearing which one feels peace. Better than reciting 100 verses of empty words is the repeating of a single stanza, hearing which one feels peace. Better than a man who conquers in battles 1,000 times 1,000 men is he who conquers himself. He indeed is the mightiest of warriors. Conquest of self is indeed better than the conquest of others. Neither a deva, god, nor a Gandharva, celestial musician, neither Brahma nor Mara could turn into defeat the victory of one who always practices self-control. Better than a man who offers, month after month, for 100 years, 1,000 sacrifices, is that man who pays homage to one grounded in wisdom. Superior is that homage to a century of formal sacrifices. Better than a man who tends the sacred fire in the forest for 100 years is that man who pays homage to one grounded in wisdom. Superior is that homage to a century of formal sacrifices. Better than a man who offers an oblation and a sacrifice for a whole year in order to gain merit is that man who pays homage to the righteous. The whole of the former is not worth a quarter of the latter. 4 blessings to the man who respects the elders and practices reverence: length of days, beauty, happiness, and strength. Better than an unrestrained life of 100 years of wickedness is the short life of a single day of the virtuous man who meditates. Better than an unrestrained life of 100 years of ignorance is the short life of a single day of the wise man who meditates. Better than an idle and a weak life of 100 years is the short life of a single day of the man who strenuously endeavors. Better than the life of 100 years of the man who perceiveth not the origin and end of things is the short life of a single day of the man who perceiveth the origin and end of things. Better than the life of 100 years of the man who perceiveth not the deathless state is the short life of a single day of the man who senses that deathless state. Better than the life of 100 years of the man who perceiveth not the highest law is the short life of a single day of the man who perceiveth the most excellent doctrine. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. Welcome, friends. We have touched on this subject a couple of weeks ago when we discussed the logoid light and how that light came into being and how it was instrumental in bringing about the physical or substance in our universe. Vibration is to and fro of rapid movement, in other words, back and forth. And we all know from scientific experiments that this goes on all around us, that there are actually no solid particles in our universe because they're all vibrating at a very high rate that the physical eye cannot see. There is an experiment that was conducted during HPV's time by Colonel Olcott, where he actually asked Mrs. Hughes to, well, let me restart it. Mrs. Hughes was very good in using musical notes, and so they put some fine powder on a drum, and when Mrs. Hughes sang a note into the tube, it made all the particles kind of move upwards. Just like when you have wind, it scattered them. But when the note settled down, all of the particles also settled down. What came about was a particular geometrical figure or a configuration on the drum. And every time the same note was played, the same configuration appeared on the drum, which shows that vibration is the cause of form, vibration. Produces all the forms that we know in our universe is produced. So how does this come about? Mr. Judge has an article called Aum, and it is recommended that all of the students read it. I have a copy of it here. It is collected from all of the writings of different writers, including HPB, and he also recorded some statements from Ramahun Roy. We'll mention it a little bit because it is important to understand what the resonance in the universe is. According to these esoteric writings, Om is the symbol of the Supreme Spirit, and it is the emblem of the Most High. When it is considered in its trilateral word consisting AUM, represents the first sound in the Sanskrit alphabet. And to proceed with it, it is stated that A starts this resonance. It's the first word of the alphabet of the Sanskrit. U continues it. In other words, it becomes this. And M or M is a stoppage. In other words, at the beginning of the Manvantara, if this divine resonance wasn't there, started with the letter A, there would be nothing in the universe that would come about. And continuation means that during the whole Manvantara, that resonance is in place. And at the end of the Yuga, Mahapralaya comes, and the M sound is produced, ending the period of activity on the whole universe. It's not just about the solar system, it's about the cosmos. According to this philosophy, this resonance is called the Word in the Bible, and in these writings it is the Logos. So if we truly understand what the word means, then we would come to the same conclusion that it means resonance. Now, we know that the universe is filled with atoms, because what is this vibration bringing about? How does movement, sound, color come about? Is the question asked. And HPP answers them in a fragment called Occult Vibrations, and you can find that online too. Now, according to the Secret Doctrine, she calls these atoms that fill the immensity of space vibrations. So she calls atoms vibrations. The philosophy states that atoms are primordial units. They are never created because they always are. At the end of the Mahapralaya or activity period, they get absorbed into their original state, but they're always there. They are not created. So primordial matter or substance is always there. Why should we talk about the atoms? Because we are told in the Secret Doctrine that these units, these primordial units, the atoms, have an inner continuous motion. Motion. And so, according to the writings again, this motion keeps the wheel of life perpetually going. And this is in the Secret Doctrine, page 633. So the sensation of sound is produced by the motion of these nature spirits or elementals, but we have to remember that behind these intelligences there are noumenal causes. Noumenal causes. In other words, before vibration, that homogeneous substance is there. And what is it that makes it come into activity is that there are intelligences that start this process in our physical universe. Remembering that the spirit we just read is the supreme essence. And from that, we're going to come 7 levels into this physical existence where everything is concretized, including those atoms. However, they are not of this earth. They are psycho-spiritual units. Now, according to that experiment that we were talking about, this musical note that was sung into the iodophone had subtler forces acting behind it. And what were these? Well, first of all, we have to remember, we talked about this before, but there are also newcomers amongst us, and we need to perhaps repeat them. There are 5 elements at this time, because we belong to the 5th subdivision of the 4th round. 5th subdivision. This is the 4th round. What are the elements? In the secret doctrine, these are divided into 5 general principles. The first one is earth, because we live on it. The second one is water. The third one is air. The 4th one is heat and light. And the 5th one is ether or Akasha. The ether is not the ether of science, because that's the lowest level of that subdivision. This is earth. Air. So these are generally known, but the 5th one, Akasha, sometimes there's an H there, and ether is spelled this way, but the one that the science refers to is this one, which is the 5th, the lowest subdivision of this Akasha. So Akasha has this in it. Every one of those develops one of our senses, because they belong each to a round. So without this resonance, which is also sound, and what else is it? Color. Sound and color, nothing would be in our universe. Color is spelled with a U in the secret doctrine, because it's the British spelling. So these are called tattvas in the system, and they produce, it is stated in the secret doctrine, our world on the subtle or astral, and also on the gross and physical planes. One is called sukshma, and the other one is shula. So this motion then is caused by the difference in the density of the material particles, so the science tells us. But this is gross substance, and it does also go through the subtle substance. But our modern scientists only go through these 4, where when we come to the 5th, they don't experiment in it. Why? Because it is invisible. Now, the Eastern psychology is aware of these divisions. They work with all of them. Our psychologists in the West do not acknowledge these divisions, and when we come to the part where we cannot see with the physical eye, it does not exist according to science, because it has been grossly materialized. In the writings, it is stated that science has done a tremendous service to humanity because it has relieved us from the burden of having to believe in dogma. We are very intelligent human beings and we can think for ourselves. In order to understand this philosophy, we do have to do a little bit of a thinking which is independent. In the Secret Doctrine again, starting, excuse me, Secret Doctrine 1, it's in the introductory. We are told that our scientists use different terminology than the old scientists. We're talking about archaic knowledge. And HPV shows in the Secret Doctrine that all of and everything that we have discovered existed back then, but under different names. So she tells us to look at Leucippus, Democritus, Lucretius, Anaxagoras, Epicurus, because they all taught the same philosophy. According to them, multitudes of atoms with their vertical motion existed from eternity, and which met and rotating together, the heaviest were drawn to the centers, the lightest to the circumferences. Each of these concretions was carried away in a fluidic matter, which receiving from this rotation and impulse, the stronger communicated it to the weaker concretions. So we see that the old philosophers were giving out the same philosophy to those who could deal with it, because remember, this was a secret science at one time. It was not given to all of the population. So there's also a reference by HPB to nature's finer forces. I'll put it here. Nature's finer forces. In this article, the writer of it is Rama Prasad, and it is quoted from in Psychic and Noetic Action. And we have also mentioned that article because it is vital that we understand what is said in it. She touches a lot of psychic and phenomenal realities that we need to deal with, and she gives us the causative reasons for it. So it is necessary to understand it. In that article, Swara is the spirit. She tells us this. Swara is the spirit itself. In that article. And that it is represented by the one life or motion. Or motion. I hope this makes sense to the newcomers today, because it is highly metaphysical and there's a lot of terminology involved in it, but how do we make it any simpler without going back to the logoic light and bringing it all the way from there to the earth? This student does not know, but let us please remind ourselves that the information given in the Secret Doctrine applies to everything in the universe. We're looking at it from a particular viewpoint every time we discuss something, because the philosophy is so detailed, it cannot be understood just talking about it in general terms. We have to look at it from a particular perspective in order to understand it. But remember, in your mind, those perspectives is one reality. It's just different aspects of it. So the motion is the cause of evolution of cosmic undifferentiated matter into the differentiated universe. Theosophy teaches that Fohat, the light of the Logos, is the creative force which impels matter to differentiate at various levels. Now, Fohat is a Tibetan term for energetic or motion aspect of the Supreme Spirit. I'll put it here. This does not exist anywhere else. The first time came across it in the Secret Doctrine. It's motion. Aspect of the Supreme. So then we see that the Supreme Spirit has already appeared in three or triunity. What was it? First, we said in the previous talk that the logoic light comes from the Absolute, but it is unmanifested. The first is unmanifested. The second, it emanates light out of its own self, but that second light is also so very bright that we can't look at it. What happens to it? It assumes a veil characteristic. In other words, it assumes substance onto it. Other than that, even HPV says in the Secret Doctrine that our own souls are so very bright, we can't look at them directly. We only see its reflection. So, remembering that, this is the motion aspect of the Supreme Spirit. Supreme Spirit. So Fohat then is that creative energy. Perhaps we'll show it in that diagrammatic form to make it a little bit easier for you all to understand. Here's the Absolute. Absolute in the Secret Doctrine is called evil with a space. Space. Okay, so this is our space, the cosmic space. So we call this primordial before, so I'll put it here. Also exists, it's everywhere. In the Secret Doctrine, there is Absolute, and there is this substance, primordial substance, that is everywhere. And the question this student asked when came across it, how does the Logos perceive the universe or the cosmos? And does it see the Absolute? Secret Doctrine says no. The Logos itself cannot see the Absolute either. It only sees it with this veil thrown all over it. What is the veil? In the Secret Doctrine, it is mulaprakriti. So I'm going to put it here. Absolute mulaprakriti. Then comes this. Then comes the unmanifested Logos. And this, what is this? It's that energy or essence, which is described as light, pure light. And it is so bright we can't look at it. It's unmanifested. And from the unmanifested comes the manifested. And from the manifested we have the three aspects of our universe. Creative, preservative, destructive, regenerative, all coming from here. It is the Trimurti, or the Trinity of the Western Christian Church, or the triad. This is the cosmic process. The same applies to the human soul, because in the secret doctrine it is given that this triadic essence is also in us. We all come from this light, which is the center of our being. So each soul then comes from this center, which is designated this way. And that the first half of it, we descend into substance. We are now a little bit over half of that duration. We are now totally immersed in substance, but HPB says in the secret doctrine, we are now past this a little bit, and we're revolving towards spirituality. What does that mean? It means that coming down, the force is centrifugal, from center out. It pushes everything to a higher expression of itself. But once we have reached the midpoint, it cannot do the same anymore. We have to then do this work. We have now immersed ourselves in substance with self-induced, self-devised effort. We have to turn around and go towards home. Where is home? The spiritual center where we came from is our home. The substance part of it is a necessity that we have to go through, but we don't have to get immersed in it. We can go through it. And, well, let me see what else I can say. Okay. There is a term that is referred to in all of these writings, including the Chinese doctrine. It is called Kang. It refers to that sound that is in our universe, and really the explanation is very insufficient, but nevertheless, the sound that we hear, like when we are in a forest and there's wind, you hear a particular sound, or you can hear the roaring of a river. That is a particular tone. And it represents the Fa on the musical scale. So all of the sounds, including all of the colors in the universe, correspond to those 7 keys on our musical instruments. And each human soul also is represented by that 7-fold nature. So we also have a primary in ourselves. There is a tone that we express. And when you look at a lion, for instance, or a tiger, their tonicity, their sound is totally different than from a dove. And HPB explains that this is how we can differentiate the tonicity of expression. Each human soul also expresses itself in a tone, if we knew only how to perceive it. And it's there for us to do so. So frequency is the number of vibrations per second, and we all know that. The human ear can only hear frequencies between 16 to 20,000 cycles per second. We don't hear the lower frequencies very well, and it is stated that it is a good thing, because otherwise we would hear the workings of our own physical body, and it would be like a roaring river if we could hear it. In other words, it's disturbing. So it's a good thing that we don't. But remember, the medical profession has found a way to augment these sounds. We use, for instance, a stethoscope to listen to the human heart, and so that augments the hearing of the doctor. Also, ultrasound is another a medical device that we use, and it is over 20,000 cycles per second, and that diagnoses tumors, as you all know, from experiments conducted, which is also used in our medicine today. Now, we all know that the colors that we're referring to are the prismatic colors, and the colors are from red all the way to violet. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And those colors all correspond to the musical scale. And that is only the prism that the human eye can perceive. Lower than red, we cannot perceive, and higher than violet we cannot, because there is ultraviolet, and there is radio waves, and radio, what were those? Microwaves. Those are lower than red, and on the violet side we have gamma rays, we have X-ray, so there's a whole color range that our eye cannot perceive. Now, after this experiment, we will stop and open it for question, even though I have not come to the end of what I need to do today. There was an experiment that is mentioned, and this was done with ants. We look at them and they're very tiny. We think that they can't hear and see, but they're not deaf. They hear the sounds that we cannot hear, because they hear very high frequencies, and they also are sensitive to blue, indigo blue, and violet. Whereas our eyes perceive the bright colors very well, which is at the other end of the spectrum, which is red, orange, and yellow. The bright colors we see a lot better than the other end of the spectrum. But the ants' vision is exactly the opposite, because they made an experiment with their eggs, and when they are put in, say, red range, the ants move them into the violet range. So they can perceive the colors that we cannot, and they also hear tones that we cannot. And it is mentioned that they must hear a tremendous musical scale of their own that we're not aware of. HPV mentions also the sounds made by the swishing of the planets in their circular movement around the sun, and that also corresponds to the scale. However, the sounds made are so wide that our ear cannot perceive it. We have to develop our inner senses to be able to hear those sounds, so that the solar system has a musical harmony that it produces as it circles around the sun, all of the planets. So we'll stop here and answer your questions. Yeah, go ahead.
We have the voice of the silence, and in it says, it talks about soundless sound. Can you please tie that to this discussion?
Yes. We didn't get to it. Occult vibration. Can we hear the resonance? Because it is nada, Brahma. And we also mentioned Swara. We cannot hear it, can we? But it's there. The resonance is This is divine resonance.
Is that different than Om? Om?
It's the first, Om is only the first letter of this divine resonance, remember that? It's the first letter of the alphabet we are talking about. This divine resonance is everywhere, and it is also in Akasha, we said, because the sound is existent in Akasha, it's characteristic. Without it, we wouldn't be able to hear anything because the vibration is there. So, the soul, you're asking to equate what's in the voice of the silence as silence to this resonance.
Yeah, how does the sound tie into the vibrations and other sounds?
Okay. We said that we all come from the same center, whatever you want to call it, force, the spirit, however you want to define it, it's the same thing. And we said that these are all different rays going in different directions. According to the secret doctrine, one of those rays is in you, one in the other. Each one finds a home in the heart of the human. So she tells us also that the heart is the organ of the higher self, par excellence. These are not my words, hers. So if that ray is in your heart, then how are we going to perceive it? The Aum, Mr. Judge says, is the sound that the baby makes when born. So that resonance, that sound of the soul is your key note. You have one. It's represented by a number. Read that article Mr. Judge wrote, where each human soul has a number. That if you know the number, you can do a tremendous mischief to that soul. So here it goes. This is very metaphysical. The center of your heart, I'm not talking about the physical heart, I'm talking about the spiritual heart, or the astral heart, or the however you want to call it. It's not the physical it's not the physical heart, it's the other heart. That heart is the core of you. And she says the heart has to become intelligent and your mind has to become compassionate. In other words, your heart has to rule what it is you are doing in your physical life. Heart. At its center, it's in the voice, I think it is also stated, that sits what? On a lotus leaf. It's Brahma in the writing. It has a hum. When would you hear it, do you think? With certainty cannot say it. However, if you do not synchronize your own heart to that center you have come, would you be able to hear the sound is what you need to ask yourself. So in meditation, what is being done is learning to lower your vibratory rate to the core of your heart. Other than that, you won't be able to hear it. And Mr. Judge says you hear it at its appointed time. In other words, you can work for that in this lifetime, but you might not be able to achieve it. Meditation, remember, requires 3 stages. The first one being concentration, the second one is contemplation, and after you have achieved that, you are now in a position to hold your mind on whatever subject or object you are scrutinizing for however long you wish to do so. Once you have reached that, then only can you start the meditation process. This is transcendence. To which field operation would you go? Buddhi manasi. This is the spiritual plane. Buddhi is your spiritual soul, and that manas represents the higher mind. The higher mind is not a thinking process. You have with the two first processes, you are now at a point where you don't have to start from premises and come to conclusions. The inner eye, what's your inner eye? The pineal gland is the inner eye, which was active in all of humanity in the fourth race. But once we have started using our spiritual faculties for wicked ends, it closed and it got withdrawn into the inner brain. So the pineal gland then, through this process that we just described, opens and becomes functional eventually on the higher spiritual levels, enabling you to look at things directly from the inside out. And you look at it, you know what it is, you know what its essence is, you know what its characteristic is. So that's direct perception. And without the pineal gland doing that activity, you won't be able to reach samadhi. Samadhi is the highest level of achievement in meditation. It's described in Patanjali's yoga aphorisms. It is called one-pointedness, ekagrata, which means that you now have ascended to those spiritual planes. You know your inner self. You know to attune yourself to the hum in your heart, and you know how to transcend to the higher planes, because without it, you can't do it. This is the process, as is described by them. And when you have gone through those initiations that we talk about in the voice of the silence, those Dana, Sheila, all those open one gate. Remember, life is sevenfold, and as you do those activities, this remembering that there's a conscious live entity at those gates, then you are allowed to pass through because you have brought the qualifications necessary. They're all spiritual. Dana being love and kindness and charity. It's the first door, and in their explanations they say that without that door being opened, you cannot go anywhere. You have to express that love, kindness, charity, concern for others in your own personal life. Other than that, it remains closed, and all of this remains closed. Now, to encourage us, they also say that once the first door is open, the one on the opposite side also activates itself at its correct time. I believe the highest one is prajna, and the description in the voice of the silence is that when that gate is opened, you have become son of the gods. Who are the gods? The Dayan Chohans in the secret doctrine, the archangels of the Jewish religion. So it is a process. We have to remember that our physical life on earth is a process. Without the causative reasons that we have created for it, it would not exist. We are all responsible for our own actions and what comes from those actions. Our life comes to us because we have done, said, and thought. Thought, speech, and action follow one another, and it is dependent solely on the human being himself or herself. In this 21st century, we have to acknowledge responsibility for what we are doing. Any other way, it won't carry us through. I hope that answers your question. You had your hand up?
I forgot what your question was.
I'm sorry.
You're talking on vibrations. That's all right. That's good. On vibrations.
Yes.
You went through a lot of stuff that we can't hear right now.
Correct.
Does meditation lead you to hearing those sounds of silence?
These are really very, very metaphysical subjects. But what do you think would happen? These vibrations follow our physical senses, right? Okay, we have 5 physical senses, correct? Now, in the voice of the silence, HPV says, we have to activate our inner senses. What is she talking about? First of all, we have to realize that our sense organs are not the ones that hear anything. Ears, nose, tongue, we have the organs, but they're not the ones that feel or taste or hear or see, eyes. We, in this philosophy, understand that our inner senses are in the astral body. This is our subtle body. Astral body is the subtle body, which is the model for the physical molecular constitution to arrange itself, because the astral body is developed first in utero, and that is what enables the baby to be formed. Without the astral body, if say arm is missing, the child will be if the astral form has shrank and the arm is not there, the child will not have that arm or the leg. So the astral body is the model body, and we are told that our senses, the inner real senses, are in the astral body. It didn't get to it. This was part of this explanation. The astral body then have the inner senses. Remembering that there are 7 levels to the astral as well, obviously the highest enables you to contact higher realms, does it not? You're up and down according to how you think. Your mind, all of the other qualities either go downward or upward according to your thinking process. In the voice of the silence, we are told that not only we have to activate these, but what do you have to do? You have to synthesize them into one. We have, she tells us, one sense. They use these sense organs to give us different information in the universe. So when you withdraw inward and you're cultivating your inner senses, in time, she says, you have to synthesize them into inner touch. And then you would know the vibrations that formulate. HPV was asked a question. Read it. Questioner. by what manner of vibrations do the elementals make colors and lights of variety? She says, that is a question I cannot reply to, though it is well known to me. Did I not tell you that secrets might be revealed too soon? She wouldn't answer it. So some of this stuff is scattered everywhere in the philosophy. You have to kind of dig it up, but I think that's what she wants us to do. She wants each human being to use their own mind and ask these questions and see if they can come up with the answers to them, because someone else telling you really does not make you realize it on the inner lines of your being. However, it's necessary to talk about these subjects because she says all like-minded people telepathically are in communication with one another too. So it's important to share these ideas. Principles are based on ideas, and the principles of the secret doctrine are ideas that we have to incorporate into our lives. So yes, then if you want to know those things, this is a process to follow. It does not seem an easy process, but I think at the beginning of this process, whatever it is that we undertake, she says that to do what appeals to us. In other words, don't base your charity on what other people tell you to do, but base it on your own inclination. If you, this student heard that there's a doctor, an MD, who goes around in DC and gives care to the homeless people. Obviously, that is what appeals to his heart, and he provides food for these homeless people at the same time as he also is giving care. Another person of interest was he went to Africa and saw this village with no water. All the women with the stuff on their head had to go to the river, get water, and bring it to the village. And so this is a young man who started this campaign when he came back to the United States to bring wells to different areas of that country. Anyway, he went with his heart. Whatever appeals to the heart, that is what we have to follow. Because when you think about it, this is the heart doctrine. Your heart has to guide you in what you need to do, not the head. Most of us go with the head, but not so with this philosophy. You have to allow that heart to express itself. So that's how we do these things, but by following our inner self. That's the guide. There was a book that came out some years ago. This person was in the north. She had had a tremendously difficult marriage. Her marriage had fallen apart, and she didn't want to stay in it. And she gave all of the money, everything she had, to her partner just to be released from the marriage contract. Then she went to Asia, and she found in that circle that there were needy people. Even though she was in a terrible condition herself, she stretched her arm, her hand, to help all those around us. She started a charity deal online where people could contribute and help all those people over there. She found the center over her own heart, the hum. She could hear the hum at the end of it. So that experience came to her to teach her. She was at an ashram, and they gave her the job of cleaning the toilets there, which she did without complaint for 3 to 6 months. So we have to look around to see how this is achieved, and it is achieved through service to humanity. Even if it is just one other that we help, even if it is one other in your family that you help. We have to start somewhere. It comes from that center that we're all connected to this root we come from. We are all human souls in evolution, but one without the other will not go anywhere. Mr. Judge in one of his articles states that nature does not allow certain parts of humanity to achieve great steps without all the other human beings left behind. He says there is no such a scheme in nature that we have to stay behind to make all of humanity move in that direction towards a spirituality, that it is our duty to do so. And not only that, but as higher intelligences, we're also expected to help all the other kingdoms lower than ourselves. Yes?
And now it's two things, because I want to ask you a question about what you just said. Last week, we talked about cleaning toilets. Last week, there was a comment making drudgery divine, which really means you've got to pay attention to what you do, every detail of what you do, and appreciate the opportunity to do it.
Okay.
That's what I got out of it anyway. So that's, the frame of mind really is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
We have to work our way in that direction.
Because whatever opportunity comes to us has come as a result of our own previous lives. Remember, we go 3 backwards also. So there was an article where the teacher is instructing, of course this is a spiritual teacher, and the student says how long he had to do this particular job, which was sweeping the compound. And he said, and the teacher said to him, well, you have to do it to such an excellence that when anyone looks at it, they will want to do the same as you are doing. In other words, you have cultivated that art to such a degree, you have done it in an excellent fashion with no complaints, but as accepting it as your duty. So that's the, I think, part you just mentioned. So it is in one of those writings where the teacher is recommending it to the student that whatever it is you're undertaking, to do the very best and cultivate that in you, that you are the very best at it. Whatever it is you're doing, it does not specify. That was just a sweeping was given as an example. And one of the students said, this article says sometimes the divine beings come as teachers, but other times they come as garbage collectors. And she said, I can't believe that's true. The student in this room said, I can't believe that can be true. And when you think about it, our environment is our home. What would happen to it if we polluted it to such a degree we couldn't occupy it anymore? We would sink like the Atlanteans. So it is very important to understand that we are part of that nature. We're not separate from it.
We're threatened in that regard now.
What's that?
With climate change, we're threatened in that regard now.
Yeah, well, if we don't wake us, I mean, if that doesn't wake us up, remember, Earth has its own modalities of shaking us like fleas off its back. It has earthquakes, it has tsunamis, it can freeze, it can flood. Yeah, we have to take note of it because we are abusing our Earth.
One quick question.
I'll make it
I hope
quick.
it's quick. Before I ever heard of Theosophy, I noticed that it seems like science has made tremendous advances in the last 100 or so years, maybe more than 100. You talked about science being the friend of Theosophy. Two-pronged question. You mentioned the pineal gland. What does science know about that?
Secret Doctrine has a whole section on the pineal gland, and she does quote in some aspects of it. Remember, this is 130 years ago, so science has made some advances in that direction. But remember also that we're still on the physical aspect of human evolution, having to deal with the mind, the spiritual aspect, and mind and morality going together. We're not dealing with those subjects. She does mention it that when scientists are moral, in other words, their aim is to alleviate problems or conditions on behalf of humanity, they're given help. But as long as they stay only on the material plane and use it for money making or gain purposes, they're not given help. But she does also say in the secret doctrine that in the future ages it will fall to physiology and biology combined to show humanity its inner essences. In other words, there will come a time when those intuitive scientists will perceive things at a higher level, obviously. Any other way, as a student, I don't know how that's going to happen. But remember also some of the scientists who are following the path of atoms in that tube are saying that it comes to a point where they can no longer follow it, and they are now working with the Dalai Lama trying to learn meditation so that they can perceive where the atom goes if it is not on the physical plane. So yeah, thank you for coming. We'll answer some more questions if you have them later.